Chapter 10. Following midday, Ranofer was the first to reach the little green room in the thicket. Haket appeared only a moment later. "What news?" Ranofer asked breathlessly. "A great deal." Haket flung himself down and began to divide his food as he talked. "I have discovered an excellent place to watch Wenemon's house. He lives near his shop, you know, in the street of the masons, which is only one street away from the street of the goldsmiths. Well, there is an alley behind the apprentices' quarters. Greetings to you, fellow spies. Seen any hangings lately?" The ancient seamed face appeared through the fringe of reeds, and his one eye rolled from Ranofer to Haket with an expression of exaggerated stealth. "Greeting, ancient one. Come in, listen. Haket has much to tell us. Go on, Haket." "Well, there is an alley behind the apprentices' quarters, which runs directly behind Wenemon's house, too. I discovered this last evening, as I was prowling about the place, and in this alley, just a short distance from Wenemon's rear wall, is a scraggly old dom palm tree, and from the branches of this tree I can see directly over Wenemon's wall and into his courtyard. He and his wife, with a voice like the hyena." The ancient cackled, and Ranofer leaned eagerly closer. "Well, go on. What did you see?" "I saw Wenemon come home from his work. I saw his wife give him barley beer and set his food before him, nagging all the while. He had salted waterfowl and bread and onions for his meal. His wife ate what was left when he had finished." "But did he go out after the meal?" "Nay, he sat in the courtyard." "Oh, then did someone come to see him?" "Nay," Haket confessed. "He did not do anything at all last evening, but I could see him perfectly. He was in my sight all the time. No doubt this evening something will happen. Then I will watch it all from my tree. It is an excellent thing to have discovered such a good place." "Aye, aye, it is," Ranofer agreed, but he could not summon as much enthusiasm as Haket seemed to expect. Boiled down, Haket's story was the same as his own. Nothing whatever had happened. "And you, ancient," Haket said, "did you find Setma last evening?" "Aye, I found him. He was at the sailmaker's when my Lotus and I brought our papyrus. I kept my eye on him a while. He went on to a wine shop and bought his food and ate it, and then walked across the mud to his vessel and went aboard. You can be sure he took no trip to Abydos or anywhere else. No vessel can move now until blessed Osiris rises and the Nile comes back to life. Possibly he entered a few kefs or devils in his cabin later. But I did not stay to see. My Lotus and I went home to our little house and rested our old bones." Again, nothing. "Well," Ranofer asked himself angrily, "what do you expect after only one evening? Patience? Stupid one. These things take time. Something will happen this evening, or perhaps tomorrow." Nothing did, however. A week passed during which neither Gaboo nor Wenemon did anything more suspicious than walk to some wine shop after the evening meal, or gamble at hounds and jackals with some crony in the privacy of their own courtyards. Satma's movements were even less interesting whenever the ancient took time to spy on him. Ranofer found the whole thing very discouraging, but Haket's interest was never flagged. It seemed rather to increase. "They are lying low," he told Ranofer one midday. "They are purposefully avoiding one another. Wait and see. There is some deep reason behind it, and we'll find what it is soon. Keep watch. Something is sure to happen any day now." At last something did. Several days after the river began to rise, Gaboo went out one evening, and Ranofer doggedly behind him, and struck straight across the city of the dead, instead of turning toward Mutra's wine shop as usual. Ranofer grew more and more excited as he followed Gaboo's twistings and turnings, more and more cautious, too, as he noticed that Gaboo often looked behind him in a not quite convincingly casual manner. Surely something was afoot this time. Ranofer was certain of it when he realized they were nearing the street of the masons, and almost choked with excitement when he saw Gaboo turn in at Wenemon's gate. "I must find the tree," he thought. "Haket will be there, and we can watch together. Perhaps we can even hear them plotting." There was no way to pass from the street of the masons into the alley behind it, except to pass through one of the houses, or else go far around by the next crossing street. After considerable fuming hesitation as to whether he should leave his post, Ranofer decided to risk it. He ran for the far corner as hard as he could run, worrying all the way over that possibly Gaboo and Wenemon might walk out of the front gate and be gone before he could find them. A glance back from the corner showed the long street still empty. He dashed on around the corner and down across the street, hurried into the alley, and was triumphantly sprinting for the tree, when just beyond it a door in the wall opened without warning, and Gaboo and Wenemon stepped out. Ranofer stopped so abruptly that a little cloud of dust rose from his skidding feet, and he almost lost his balance. They had not looked in his direction yet, but in no time at all they would. Frantically, he groped at the wall beside him, clutched a latch, and pushed in. In an instant, he was inside some stranger's courtyard. In another instant, a dog was rushing towards him, giving him tongue as he came. Ranofer turned in a panic to the wall again, seized a branch of some creeper, and with the aid of a toe-hold and the roughness of the plaster pulled himself up a few inches above the dog's snapping jaws. They still looked frighteningly close. He took a better grip in the vine and loosed one foot to search for a wider crack. The moment he moved, the vine began to pull away from the wall. He froze. One more moment, and he would fall straight on top of the dog, or else Gaboo would open the gate and find him. In that minute, some dark object sailed over his head, and the dog's snarling changed to an offended yelp. Another object followed. This time Ranofer heard the chunk as it hit, and the dog howled and made off across the courtyard. "Ranofer!" came an urgent whisper from somewhere above him. "Come out, quick! They've gone!" Ranofer dropped to the ground, staggered with relief and treacherously numbed toes, flung himself out the gate, and closed it. As he leaned against it, panting, Haket dropped from the branches of the dom palm and ran towards him. "Hurry! They've gone that way! We can still follow and keep them in sight." What did you do to that dog?" Ranofer gasped as Haket pulled him relentlessly down the alley. "I threw dom nuts at him. I could see everything that happened. I knew they were coming out of that black gate, and I thought they'd catch you for sure. Come this way. There they are, ahead there. Lucky for you, I could see into that courtyard where the dog was, as well as I could see into Wenemon's. Where were you going so fast?" "I was coming to join you." They had slowed down now, and Ranofer's breath was beginning to return. "I followed Gaboo to the street of the Masons, saw him go in." "Well, it's turned out well enough this time, as the ostrich said when he swallowed the melon, but there had better not be a next. That was too close for my peace of mind." "Mine, too. Still, I'm glad I'm not hiding beside the front gate still, waiting for them to come out. Look, they are turning toward the shop." "Gaboo's shop?" "Aye, it's just yonder. We'd best get out of sight a minute." They ceased whispering and flattened themselves into a shadow. A little way down the dusk-filled streets, they could see Gaboo and Wenemon pause at the door of the stone-cutting shop, and after a moment go inside. "Maybe Setma will come now," Haket whispered. "Maybe this is their meeting place." Setma did not come, however. After a while a torch flared inside the shop, and they could see it moving in a leisurely way here and there. It stayed some time in the scroll room, then flickered toward the place where Ranofer knew the judge's coffin stood. "It is only some matter of business," Ranofer said, disappointed. "The judge's entrance passage is too narrow for his coffin, or the other way around. I heard Gaboo speak of it once. That's all they're talking about now. This has nothing to do with gold stealing." Haket sighed. After lingering a few minutes longer, he said rather lamely, "Well, we have done all we can today, as one locust said to another. Perhaps tomorrow." The two boys separated and went their ways again. Nothing had happened. The Nile rose freely in the next few weeks. In spite of the relentless heat, the gloom of the god's death was gone from Egypt, and the joy of his rebirth was in every man's speech and walk and brightened eye. Navigation began again on the river, and the pace of life quickened. Except that he shared the deep relief of his fellow Egyptians at the river's rising, Ranofer's life did not change. For a time he and Haket doggedly continued their spying and reporting to each other, and the ancient joined in when he could. The old man could not come often to the little green room nowadays because he was cutting his papyrus in a distant part of the marsh, and the sailmakers demanded bigger loads each day in this season of boat building and refitting. Occasionally, though, his seamed old face would appear through the curtain of reeds, and with his cheerful cackle and his "Seen any hangings lately?" he would come in and share his food with them. He kept a faithful, intermittent eye on Setma, too. The rivermen had begun regular trips up and down the Nile again. The ancient always made them laugh with his mock solemn reports, but he never found out anything. Probably, Ranofer reflected, because there was nothing to find out. He himself was fast losing all faith in the spying. Never had Gaboo behaved so innocently. Never had a man seemed so devoted to his own courtyard and nagging wife as Wenemon. Occasionally the two met at Mutrez or at the stone-cutting shop to study the scrolls, and presumably to confer the long, dull periods over building plans. Neither went anywhere near a gold house, or appeared to be acquainted with so much as a goldsmith's apprentice. Gaboo was not stealing anything, that was all. He was doing nothing whatever but live a stone-cutter's routine life. No doubt Pharaoh had paid more than usual for the temple work. Whatever the explanation, the continuing signs of wealth were not due to stolen gold. So Ranofer reasoned, and could find no fault in the reasoning, however much he wanted to, until one night, when he was awakened again by the squeak of hinges, he lay still, listening to the stealthy pad of Gaboo's feet on the stair, and crossed the courtyard, feeling the usual tingling thrill down his spine as the gate latched softly, and he knew Gaboo was out in the dark street, moving among the nameless evils of the night on one of his own errands. What kind of errands could they be? That he would brave even demons and kefs to accomplish them. What would conceivably be that important, especially to Gaboo? As far as Ranofer had ever been able to discover, nothing was important to Gaboo, except gold. Except gold. Ranofer sat straight up on his mat and stared at the dark. Gold! Of course! Gaboo was after gold. Why in the name of Aman had he not realized it before? This was when what the thief was doing when the thief was doing his thieving. Those squeaky hinges were the answer to everything. They explained the inexplicable. They wiped out the contradiction between Gaboo's innocent daytime behavior and his mysteriously increasing wealth. It was no wonder, Ranofer thought disgustedly, that all his spying in Heket's and the ancients had gained them nothing. Everything was happening while they slept. What exactly was happening, though? Who was Gaboo robbing? Could he be climbing over courtyard walls, creeping into rich men's houses, prying into their storerooms and treasure chests in the dead of night? Ranofer could not picture it. As well picture a block of granite wafting like a feather, or a hippopotamus slithering like a cat. Rich men had guards about their courtyards, and light dozing hounds, and servants who slept across the storeroom doors. Just one of Gaboo's heavy footfalls, even at his stealthiest, they were audible, and the whole household would be shouting the alarm. Could he be stealing from some gold house, then? But there were guards at all gold houses, too. The palace? Ridiculous. Impossible. Where, then? Ranofer asked himself, exasperated. Where does he go when he sneaks out like this? Where is he going this minute? The question resounded in Ranofer's mind as if he had spoken it aloud. Slowly his eyes turned toward the gate, barely visible in the shadows of the wall. If I followed him now, he thought, I could find out. For an instant he did not move, only stared toward the gate while visions of Kefs and horrors paraded before his eyes. Then he rose slowly to his feet and stole toward the gate. There he paused again, trembling, before he reached out for the latch. The gate swung open, another dreadful pause, and Ranofer stepped out into the street. It looked utterly strange at this hour. The moon had set already, and the darkness was profound. Not a torch flickered anywhere, not a gleam of lamplight shone from any house. Straight above her, the stars in their brilliance served only to emphasize the blackness of Egypt here below. What faint light they shed fell gloomily upon some roof corner or a waving strand of vine, transforming familiar daytime shapes to eerily unfamiliar phantoms. Gaboo was not in sight. I waited too long, Ranofer thought. He could be streets away by this time, and I don't know which way he went. A voice inside him said, Coward, you're simply making excuses. But I promised the ancient I would never follow at night, Ranofer told the voice. I gave my word. Coward, here is your chance, at last, and you're afraid to take it. You're afraid! Yes, I'm afraid, Ranofer thought desperately, but he could not endure the voice any longer. Tucking his head down as far as it would go between his hunched-up shoulders, he darted down the black street in the direction of the river. Whether it was the right direction or not, he had no idea. Gaboo might have gone the opposite way or followed one of a dozen crooked alleys across the city toward Wenama's house. Yes, would he not have done that? Ranofer whirled and doubled back, casting a shrinking look over his shoulder as he did so. He saw nothing but blackness, heard nothing but the light staccato of his own frightened feet. I must say a charm, he thought as he peered through the darkness of the darker rectangle which would be an alley's entrance, turning his eyes every instant to this side and that for fear of some unknown thing that would pounce upon him if he could not keep watch. Avaunt, ye dead man, he whispered hastily. Who comes in the darkness? Who enters stealthily, with nose behind, face turned backwards? The whisper changed to an uncontrollable chattering of teeth as Ranofer halted beside the narrow panel of blackness he was seeking. The alley was darker and the street much darker and much more frightening, if that were possible. Gingerly he stepped into it. Avaunt, ye dead woman who comes in the darkness, who enters stealthily with a nose behind, face turned backwards. The very words he was saying frightened him into a drenching sweat. They conjured up so clearly the horrors that might be creeping up behind him now. This minute, or lurking behind that object near the wall, whatever it was, or hovering just over his head with withered hands stretching out to seize him. Ranofer whirled in a panic, to stare behind him and above him, and at the same time stumbling back away from the unknown object near the wall. At that instant, three things happened. A blow behind his knees knocked his feet from under him and sent him sprawling. Something soft and bodiless rushed past him, even while sharp claw-like fingers seized his shoulders in a dozen different places, and the night was rent by a wild and eerie screech. Ranofer tried to scream, but he could not, or else he screamed and could not hear it over the hideous reverberations of that other noise. He tore himself free of the clawing fingers, half fell, half threw himself out of the alley, and by the time the last shivering wail had died away, was tugging at his own gate. One last agonized glance behind as he flung it open showed him a lean, gliding shape on the top of a wall, silhouetted against the stars. The gate slammed behind him. He leaned against it, trembling all over, too weak to walk another step. After a while he went shakily to his mat and dropped upon it. It took him some time to quiet his breathing, longer to stop trembling, and longer still to remember some fleeting familiarity about that gliding shape he had seen. For a while his mind would not accept it. Then a cat called from somewhere down the street, a low and quavering, drawn-out wail. Ranofer's hail lifted in a cold tremor of recognition, which was followed by burning shame. Could it have been a cat? Only a cat? From which he had fled as if it were a demon? No, impossible! Remembering the blow behind the knees, the bodiless something rushed past him, and the clawing fingers. His shoulders still stung from the scratches. When he put his hand to them, he could feel the little welts. He felt again, frowning. They felt remarkably like thorn scratches, and a cat, if he had stumbled back upon it and had bounded away, might have hit him behind the knees as it escaped. Its fur, as it rushed past him, would have felt exactly like a bodiless something touching him. "Aye, what a coward you are," Ranofer told himself disgustedly. "You shied away from nothing, fell into a thorn bush, and frightened a cat as badly as if it frightened you. Now you'll never find Gaboo, and he could be anywhere by this time." Still, he could try. He went to the gate once more and opened it. The street was as black and as threatening and as enigmatic as before. There was no shape now upon the wall. Had it really been a cat? Cats could take any shape they chose, any time they chose. Would a mere thorn bush have felt quite so much like clutching fingers? Ranofer stared into the darkness, shivering. Aye, perhaps it was a cat and a thorn bush, he thought, and perhaps it was not. In any case, Gaboo was gone. He stepped back and closed the gate, making sure the latch caught securely. Then, because there were cats in the world, did not mean that there were kefs also. One was as real as the other, and both were abroad at this hour. He did not care to encounter either tonight. Next time the hinges squeak, I will follow, Ranofer thought as he went back to his mat. The very next time. There was no next time. For several nights he stayed awake as long as he could, but weariness always overtook him, long before the hour at which the hinges might have squeaked. He changed his tactics and went to sleep early, hoping that by that hour he might be sleeping lightly enough to wake any noise. Neither plan produced results. He suspected there was no noise to hear, and after all, he thought exasperately, I cannot make the hinges squeak, even if I stay awake all night. It is simply that Gaboo is not going out. He had mentioned nothing of his nocturnal fiasco to Haket or the ancient, and now he was glad, very glad, it was enough to endure his own humiliating knowledge that if he had started after Gaboo sooner, or pursued him faster, or been braver, all the mystery might have been unravelled by now. A fine spy I have turned out to be, Ranofer told himself. I am as great a bumbler as I am a coward. The ancient was right. I would be better occupied in learning the stonecutter's trade as well as I can. It is at least a way to earn my bread when I am a man, and no doubt I can never be a goldsmith. Smothering the rage of protest that rose in him in spite of all reason, he sat himself drearily to improving his skill at stonework, observing the methods of the craftsmen, trying to understand the running of the shop. When Pi sent him one morning to the scroll-room and told him to set the shelves in order, he studied the drawings as he worked, noting the design of a further temple addition, comparing the plans for a royal shrine or two, and marking the variations in several tombs. One of these latter drawings contained a detail he found in none of the others, either a truncated passage or a small room in a location which seemed either senseless or mistaken. He puzzled over it a while, forcing himself to think, if possible, explanations in spite of his usual boredom and utter lack of interest in what its purposes might be. None of the explanations fit, and he threw the scroll aside impatiently. A moment later he picked it up. He was a stonecutter's apprentice, and, tedious though it may be, he had resolved to learn his trade. He carried the scroll into the shop and looked around for Pi. Instead he saw Gaboo just straightening from his inspection of the finisher's progress on a limestone slab. "Well," Gaboo grunted, "what do you want? Why are you standing there?" "I want to ask a question of Pi about the scroll." Ask it then. Of me. I am the master here." Wishing he had thrown the scroll into the Nile, Ranofer silently unrolled it and pointed to the little chamber. "This room. I do not understand its purpose." Instead of an answer, he got a blow on the head that sent him sprawling on the gritty floor. "Impudent mongrel!" Gaboo flung the words at him like stones. "Why should you understand it? You'll do what you're told here, and nothing more. Do you understand me?" He leaned down and snatched the scroll from Ranofer's hand and thrust it into the folds of his sash. His face was contorted with rage. Ranofer had seldom seen him look more vicious. Dazed by the blow and the completely unexpected reaction he had provoked, Ranofer could only stare. "Up with you," Gaboo snapped, digging the copper-sheathed toe of his sandal into the boy's ribs. "Back to work, and keep your questions to yourself hereafter." He strode off across the shop, and Ranofer escaped the scroll-room, consumed with resentment and bitterly resolved that he was through with trying to be of value in the shop. He finished the day in a silence as sullen as that of the other apprentice, Nebre, whose stony indifference to men and work alike he was beginning to understand very well indeed. In the late afternoon, Wenamon came into the shop and glided in his chilling, cat-like way toward the statue base Gaboo was measuring. Watching the two from beneath skulkily lowered lids, Ranofer saw Gaboo walk quickly to meet him and draw him aside. They conferred a moment, then the scroll was produced from Gaboo's sash and transferred to Wenamon's. Hateful thing, Ranofer thought, as he stretched the red-chalked string across a block of granite. I hope it brings both of them bad luck. I hope the roof of that imbecile little room falls in on them while they're building it. I hope it is a stupid mistake they have made in their stupid drawings, and that the owner of the tomb will have them lashed and refuse to pay, and discredit them in all the city of the dead, and that Pharaoh hears of it and sends them far away into the desert to labor in the gold mines. That should please Gaboo, greedy thief that he is. Unfortunately, all the ill wishes he could invent were not powerful enough to rid him of Gaboo's stubborn presence here in the Thebes. Ranofer forced the scroll in his own anger to the back of his mind. It only made him hotter on an already oppressive day. That evening after work, he met Haket in the thicket and told him about it. "I only asked a question," he finished sulkily, "and I get a cuff that makes my ears ring all day. He won't even let me learn his craft, much less the one that I want. Perhaps there is something secret about that little room, something he did not want you to find out." "Nay, how could there be? It was drawn there on the scroll. Anyone could see it." "But did you not say he gave the scroll to Wenamon later?" "Aye, but there is nothing unusual in that, I told you. They work together often. Let's not talk about it any more. I am sick of the subject." The subject was not closed, however. Later that evening, much later, for he had even less desire than usual to go home and had dawdled about until almost nightfall, he opened the gate to the courtyard to find Gaboo waiting for him, grim-jawed. Hoping it was only the coppers he wanted, Ranofer went directly to him and put them in his hand. He turned quickly toward the storeroom, but Gaboo spun him around. "Now, I want an explanation of that question you asked today. I want no lies either. Make haste, speak." "I only asked the purpose of that little room. What harm is there in that?" One of Gaboo's fists rose more swiftly than Ranofer could dodge and struck him a glancing blow across the mouth, which nevertheless felt as if it had loosened half his teeth. "I know what you asked. I want to know why you asked it." "Because I was trying to learn your hateful trade," Ranofer shouted. "I was trying to grow skillful. I was trying to understand how tombs are made and the shrines are built. Never fear, I'm finished with that now. I intend to do what I am told and not the smallest bit more." He fell silent, trembling with anger and with fright at his own temerity. One did not shout at Gaboo without paying for it somehow, now or later. No matter, Ranofer thought, let him beat me. It is worth it sometimes. However, Gaboo only stared at him fixedly, the one eye blinking. There was no possible way of telling what was going on behind the stony mask of his face. After several minutes that seemed a lifetime each, he turned away, walked to the gate, and went out. Ranofer's knees gave way from weariness and discouragement. He sat down where he was on the rough stones of the pavement and did not think at all for a while. After some time he became conscious of a trickle of something on his chin. He touched it gingerly and drew his hand away, smeared with blood. His split lip was beginning to swell painfully. He got to his feet, walked to the storeroom, and tugged open the door, feeling the saliva pour into his mouth as the fragrance of grain and salted fish came out to meet him. Stepping into the gloom, he felt his way from shelf to shelf, encountering the curve of bowls, the rough edge of a basket, the cool, sweating sides of the big water jar. Dipping a mugful, he splashed water freely on his lip and chin before he drank. There were a few crumbs in the basket and an onion in one of the bowls, but Gaboo had left nothing else on purpose, Ranofer was certain. The onion was small, but he ate it, thankful for the part of Haket's lunch at noon, then poured the crumbs carefully into his palm and licked it clean. Far from satisfying him, the sketchy meal only whetted his appetite. Moreover, the onion had made his lips smart and burn. It was swelling rapidly and felt as big as a duck's egg. More water eased his throbbing lip, but not his hunger. He left the storeroom, banging the door behind him, and started for his sleeping mat under the tree. Halfway there, an audacious thought stopped him. Slowly, he turned toward the stairs. Gaboo had frequently threatened to beat him insensible if he ever set foot in that upper room. On the other hand, Ranofer was in the mood to ignore all threats and defy Gaboo if he could. Moreover, he was ready to wager his one shenty that there was food hidden away up there, and Gaboo was gone. Next instant, he was creeping toward the stairs. It was almost full dark, but the moon god Thoth's heavenly bark was revealed in its high proud boat shape clearly these nights of its waning, was beginning to shed a gentle radiance over the littered pavement. Keeping well in the deep shadows next to the wall, Ranofer hurried up the worn and slanting steps, his mind full of enticing images, honey cakes, a whole keg of dried fish, a handful of sweet sticky dates. He reached the passage and moved to the closed door at its end. There he paused, breathing hard, his ears straining for any sound below. Then he tugged at the bolt. It resisted. He tugged harder, bracing his shoulder against the door. At last it gave way with a jolt, and the door swung inward. The thin squeal of the leather hinges made him shiver in spite of himself. He stepped into the room. It was windowless, like all Egyptian dwellings, but just over the level of Ranofer's head the walls ended, and widely spaced wooden posts rose from them to support the ceiling several feet above. Through the space thus opened to the fresh air of evening, moonlight poured in, dimly lighting Gaboo's fraying sleeping mat and baked clay headrest, a stool or two, a box in one corner, and a battered wooden chest in the other. Ranofer tried the box first. He found nothing there but a coal pot half full of black-eye paint, a copper mirror, a razor, and a little jar of the ointment Gaboo had been perfuming himself with lately. The chest looked no more promising. He fumbled hastily among the sandals, headcloths, a couple of coarse white linen shanties, 4 sizes larger than the one wrapped around his own narrow hips, and several of the new, fine-woven ones. There was something hard and curving in a corner, wrapped in a scrap of cotton rag. It might be a jug of honey. He tugged it out, jerked the cloth away impatiently, and went numb all over with the shock of what he saw. There in his hand lay a gold goblet, more beautiful than the sun. For a moment he stood perfectly still, then he sank to his knees, for his legs had suddenly become too weak to support him. In a shaft of moonlight he examined his find more closely. It was pure gold, exquisitely fashioned in the shape of a lotus blossom. An inlaid band around its rim was of priceless silver, and so was its delicate stem. It was the work of some master who was Zhao's equal or superior, and worth a prince's ransom. Gaboo had stolen it, that was certain. But where? From whom? There was not a gold house in the city of the dead that produced such work as this. Only Zhao could have made it, and Ranofer was growing more and more uncertain whether even Zhao could have, or would have. There was something about it that was different from the work one saw nowadays. The manner of finishing the inside of the base, for instance. Perhaps it had been made long ago, handed down to some rich noble from his father. Ranofer bent closer. Was that a bit of picture writing etched into the gold curve of a petal? He twisted it to catch the light and saw a group of hieroglyphics enclosed in an oval line. The sign of royalty. Just so were the names of kings always written, with an oval line about them. Had that accursed one stole this from the palace itself? But how under heaven could anyone have done that? Perhaps he could read the name, if the light was sufficient, and if he had not forgotten too many of the little pictures he had learned at the scribe's school. Slowly, one by one, he spelled out the hieroglyphs. Thutmose Nefer Keperu. Ranofer's hand grew slowly icy, while he knelt staring at the goblet as if it had turned to an adder in his grasp. He read the inscription again and still again, and there was no mistake. This treasure bore the name of Thutmose the Conqueror, Pharaoh of Egypt, over 100 years ago. Gaboo had robbed a tomb. There was no other explanation. Suddenly all Ranofer wanted was to get the goblet back into the chest and himself out of this evil room. Clumsy with fright and haste, he dropped the cotton rag 3 times before he was able to wrap it about the goblet as it had been before. He knew very well his life would not be worth a copper if Gaboo came home at this moment. He thrust the bundle deep into the chest, and with shaking hands scattered the shanties and the headcloths over it, shut the battered lid, and sprang for the stairs. As he did so, his bare feet grated on some gritty substance in the doorway. He stopped, peering down at scattered particles of dried clay on the moonlit floor. What was this? Some trap? He whirled to examine the bolt. Only then did he see that it had been sealed with a lump of clay and marked with a clear imprint of Gaboo's scarab ring, an imprint which was now half broken away by the doors having been opened. One glance and Gaboo would know he had been in the room.